Welcome back to the American Garage. Today we're going to cast some metal. What inspired this project is that I wanted to make some wings for my students so that then when they get their license, I give them a set of wings. So I made this model out of plastic. I did it in 3D on a 3D software, and then I had it 3D printed, and I'm going to use this as a mold for my castings. So today we're going to cast wings in aluminum. So I had to learn about how to melt metal, and the first thing I did was I found a video on the King of Random about how to make a small foundry and how to melt aluminum. I thought this would be perfect for us, so I made a small foundry based on the plans that he gives. And if you'd like to build one, I'll include a link to his video so you can see how it's done. But let me just give you the short version. Basically what you need to do is you need to have a metal bucket. You take a metal bucket and you line it with a combination of plaster and sand. Use 1 part of sand to 1 part of plaster. Mix it together and use it to line the inside of the bucket. Now, the easiest thing to do is to put another bucket, a smaller one, inside to create the cavity in the middle that you need. Now this will be our foundry. Now I've also got some other tools that we're using along with the foundry. Now some other tools that I'm using along with it is we have to have a crucible. So I found myself a crucible online. It's a graphite crucible, and it's really made for this purpose. They're not that expensive, so I went ahead and got a really good crucible. We're also going to be using some mini muffin tins to take care of the extra metal, because once we melt the metal, the excess that we don't need for our casting we'll have to put in something. So we'll use the mini muffin tins. We're going to be firing our foundry today with charcoal. And I've got various tools and pliers and some good leather gloves that will help us out. Now in preparation for today, I had made one firing of the foundry about a week ago, and I put some sheet aluminum in there, thinking that this would be very easy to melt. But what happened, if you use sheet aluminum, it just turns into this mess here. Let me show you up close. So what happens is the sheet aluminum is rolled and heated and rolled and stamped, and all sorts of things happen to it to make it sheet aluminum. And what happens if you try to use this is it didn't melt. It just broke up into pieces. So we're not going to use that. Now you can use aluminum cans like beer cans and pop cans, soda cans, but those will work just fine because they're spun aluminum. Okay? Now what I'm going to be using today is I'm going to be using cast aluminum, because it was melted down and poured into a form, and so it will melt back down very easily. Now I am going to use the pistons from an aircraft engine, because they're aluminum. They were too big, so I had to cut them in half so I could put them into my crucible. Now, once we have our metal melted down, we want to make something out of it besides just filling up the mini muffin tins with it and making little mini metal muffins. So that's not our point, that's for the excess. What we want to do is we want to create our fine project, our wings. And now, of course, if you use a little bit of imagination, you can use this to do anything with. You could make your own custom doorknobs for your kitchen cabinets. You could make emblems, custom emblems for your car or other projects that you have. You can do any number of things. Just use a little bit of imagination. But I'm going to be making the wings. So in order to cast something like this, we have to have a form to cast it in. So what we have is we have this sand. Now it has oil in it and some other things, and it's made specifically for casting metal. So I bought some of this sand, and it's real firm, and once you pack it in, it's like it's like brown sugar in a way, and it holds its shape real nice. So once you've got that, you've got some sand, you have to have a form to put it in, and I made this form out of wood and just some hardware for cabinets and some extra 2x4s, and I was able to make this. So let me show you what I've got here. It has two sides. And right now, this is full of sand. Okay? The sand is packed in here. So what we have here is two sides to the form. Now our wings were pressed into this side. And then once we had all the sand packed in from the other side, then we lifted them out and we have our form. Now we laid this one on top and packed it with sand so that we could cast it. Now why not just use this side and pour the metal in here? It'll bubble over the top and you won't get the form that you want. It'll be a mess. So you have to put the top on it like this, and you can see that I put a couple holes in it. Now each of those holes go down to each side of my little wings. So what's going to happen is I'm going to pour it in one hole, and when the metal comes up out of the other side, I'll know that I have a complete casting. Okay, let's fire up the foundry. I'm just using regular old charcoal. I'll put my some on the bottom, and then I'll arrange the briquettes a little bit. I'll put my crucible in the middle, and then I'll fill around it as much charcoal as I can get in there. Alright, now I've filled my foundry as much as I could, leaving enough room for the crucible to be able to have my lid on top. It's still getting hot, but it looks like we're on our way there. I checked it just a minute ago, and about half of the metal is melted into liquid. I'm waiting until all the metal is melted, and then we'll skim the impurities off the top. We got some impurities. We'll take those off. Now make sure you don't breathe the fumes from this, because the fumes coming off of the metal can be kind of nasty. Here, I want you to have a look. let's see if we can make our first casting. Looks like it worked fine. Now the rest of our metal we'll pour into the mini metal muffins. Now I'm setting it on wood because if you set it on the concrete, it will it'll draw the moisture out of the concrete and splatter metal everywhere. So that's why I'm using a piece of wood. It's going to burn a little bit, but it's going to be safer than the concrete. Okay, now I let it cool off. It's still pretty hot, but it's solid. So let's see what we ended up with. All right. And there we are. Our first successful casting. Now here is the first successful casting. I'll put it in the water to cool it off the rest of the way, and then we'll cut off these pieces, these excess pieces. Not bad for a first try. Now that I've showed you the first successful casting, let's prepare the form for the next casting, and I'll show you how it's done. But first of all, this black sand that came in contact with the metal, we can't keep the black sand. So I'm going to remove the stuff that got burned. And I'm going to keep and reuse the rest of it. I got rid of the stuff that's burned. So now we can take our form apart and get it ready for the next time. So now notice how well the sand stays in there. But I'm just going to break it out, because we got to start all over again. Now this form worked out pretty good. Let me show you what I did though. I cut a groove on the inside so that the sand would go up into that groove and act as a way to hold on to the form. I noticed some other people had made forms and they just had flat sides, and the form would sometimes lift off of the sand. That's no good. So this worked out pretty well. So I'll get my form all cleaned out and ready to pack it up again. Alright, now I have my form all cleaned out and ready to make a new mold. Okay, so I'm using this old cabinet door because it's got a nice smooth surface to it. I'm going to take some some talcum powder, some baby powder, and this helps it to not stick. And I'll just sprinkle it on it there. Now we want it to stick on the inside of here, so we won't put it inside here. This is the bottom of the form. And see if I got enough room. Make a little more room for it to sit in there. Okay. Now, you will notice that I've got these notches, and that's so that it lines up exactly. And I also got some latches that I got to hold it together once I get everything set. Okay? So the first thing we need to do, though, is, I almost forgot, we got to turn this upside down. With our form upside down, I'll take the item that I want to cast, and I'll set it in the middle. Remember, this part of the form is upside down right now. So set that in there. We'll put some baby powder on our item so sand doesn't stick to it. And now we'll just start taking our sand, and I'm going to crumble it up real small to pack around the item itself. I want to pack it really, really tight. And I'll just start filling this up. It's a lot like brown sugar. Don't eat it though. Now, it may look like it's alright, but it's nowhere near packed. So here's what we're going to do. I've got a 2x4, and I'm just going to start packing it in. My item is on the bottom there, facing up towards me right now. I will just keep packing it in until I have the form completely full. Now, with it nearly full, then we'll take the edge of our board and we'll just kind of walk it over the top and scraping off the excess. We want it to be perfectly flat, so when we find that there's holes, we'll fill in those holes. And there we are. Now what we'll do is we'll turn the frame over very carefully. First I'll slide it around a little bit, make sure it's loose on the bottom. And as you can see, we've got our item in the middle. And we'll turn it right side up. Now we're going to take the second half of our frame, place it on top. Now this time what we're going to do is we're going to use a couple of dowels, and these will go down right on top of our item. So you notice how we had that little piece in here that didn't fill in right? I'm not liking it. So we're going to take this apart, we're going to do it again. Now this time, instead of using just the one, I went ahead and prepped our first casting to be a second mold. So we'll do two at one time. So I'll put those in there. So we have our 2 molds right here. We'll do 2 at one time this way. Now we'll put a little bit of powder on top of them. Now we'll break it up the sand as fine as I can. Because we don't want any gaps this time. Alright, looks like we're ready. That's close enough. Now what we'll do is we'll move it around a little bit, make sure it's loosened from the other side. We'll pick it up. Flip it over. Instead of carving out with my spoon a little canal, I've found this little piece, I don't even know what it is, but it's got tapered sides and I think it'll make a nice little tunnel. So I'm going to lay it on top of my 2 molds in there. And I'm going to, well, let's get some powder on it. Lay it across there and we'll pack that side up. Oh. Don't forget the dowels. Now this little piece is going to be my tunnel going across. And I see that it touches both of them, so it's going to work out just right. And where my dowels came down are touching the other sides of my objects, so we're going to be good. So let's very carefully dig these items out. First, I'm going to dig this one out. Now this one I don't have to be too careful about because it's just the waste anyway. It's gonna be taken off. Now we say a little prayer, "Oh Lord, please don't let me mess it up." Amen. Now let's see if I can get these out without disturbing the middle. And I did it this time. But when I flipped it out there, I messed up that corner. It's okay, we'll just file that off after we cast it. I'm blowing out little pieces of sand that have fallen in there. Oh, I did it. Now the very first time I did this, I guess I must have just got lucky because the middle stayed intact when I pulled the piece out. But today it took me about 3 or 4 different times to get it. All right, now that we've got it, I'm gonna put the 2 halves together. I'm going to blow off the extra sand. Make sure I didn't get any in my mold. All right. Now we're ready to put it back together. Now that our mold is ready, let's go light the fire. Okay, let's see what we've got. Well, now look at that. Two nice new set of wings. Okay, so let's recap the whole process. First, we made ourselves a foundry in a small trash can, like the King of Random's process has, and look below for the video. So we made our foundry and we started melting aluminum. What we found was don't melt sheet aluminum, that doesn't work so well. Find some cast aluminum that's going to work much better. Old pistons, cast aluminum parts like that will work really great. Then what we had to do was we had to make our form and use the sand, the special casting sand, to make the form with and get ready to melt the aluminum and pour the aluminum. Just remember, aluminum wants to be poured once it's liquid within 3 minutes, and you may be tempted to stir it, but don't stir it. That'll only introduce oxidation into the metal. Okay, that's it for this episode of The American Garage. We'll see you next time right here on The American Garage. Hit the subscribe and like buttons and let us know what you think of this episode in the comments below.